So you found out you had Asperger syndrome?
That's correct, yes. By my own request, I was assessed by the University of Texas Health Sciences Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences in Houston, Texas, and they confirmed the diagnosis of Asperger's that I, with input from my mother, had begun to self-diagnose. There was also an additional diagnosis of depression, which was also unsurprising.
Are you seeking any kind of therapy or support?
Yes, there is a Houston area Aspie adult support group that I attend once per month in the evening in my hometown in the suburbs.
Do you think your condition played a role in your employment difficulties in recent years?
Most definitely. I performed best working for a large international insurance company on their medical evacuation logistics casework. The responsibilities were narrowly focused and well-defined, and I excelled at this kind of work. Moving into libraries, where responsibilities were more vague, open-ended and long-term as a librarian, I felt adrift and continually struggling, and felt completely blindsided when my boss decided to let me go. This has happened to me twice now, before I was diagnosed with Asperger's.
Do you think your undiagnosed Asperger syndrome played a role in your divorce?
It certainly exacerbated already strained conditions. There was a lot going on in that often dysfunctional relationship, but Asperger's syndrome did not help matters. I recently read the book 22 Things a Woman Must Know If She Loves a Man with Asperger's, and I must say it was very eye-opening to read and absorb. My ex-wife and I both suffered in our ignorance of Asperger's, and how difficult a relationship can be between someone neurotypical like my ex and someone with Asperger's like me.
What led you to believe you might have Asperger's in the first place?
My mother suggested it to me as a possibility. My ex-wife had suggested I might have ADHD, and while this proved to be incorrect, it is a common misdiagnosis for people with Asperger's, so she was clearly onto something. I also asked a coworker, a registered nurse with psychiatric patient experience and a dear friend, what she thought of the possibility that I might have Asperger's. She completely floored me when she said that she had always thought I had the condition. This is a person who has known me very well for about 10 years, and whose opinion in these matters I highly respect. That's what prompted me to seek professional assessment through the new Asperger's clinic at the University of Texas Health Sciences Center in Houston.
Is Asperger's treatable with medication? Counseling?
Asperger's is a neurological disorder. It has to do with how my brain is wired differently from someone who is neurotypical or normal. It is not treatable with medication, though my co-diagnosis of depression probably is. Counseling mainly can help me be aware of my social deficits as a person with Asperger's, and how to try and compensate for them. I can be taught and learn intellectually the social cues and rules that neurotypical people are able to pick up on intuitively. I've done remarkably well over the years, and I guess in the main I'm one of the lucky ones. Some Aspies my age have never even gone on a date, much less been married, and had mature adult sexual relationships before. I used to think my track record with relationships was pretty pathetic, but compared to other people with Asperger's and how they suffer, I've done pretty well for myself, comparatively speaking.
How does your Asperger syndrome intersect with your atheism?
According to a recent study, people with Asperger's naturally reject teleological explanations for reality. We don't look for supernatural or metaphysical lessons in the mundane events of life because it strikes us immediately as absurd. We reject this out of hand. This is different than neurotypical atheists, who do begin to think in these terms, but have to consciously reject such conclusions. You could say that all Aspies are perhaps predisposed to a more naturalistic worldview because of our different neurological makeup. That is not to say that there are no religious Aspies out there. There certainly are. But their religious ideas are somewhat constrained by their differing neurological makeup that makes them Aspies. For myself, I know that I have always personally hated the insipid mantra that everything happens for a reason. I now understand better why my reaction to this idea has always been so viscerally negative and immediate, and that is because in addition to being a longtime atheist, I'm also a person with Asperger's syndrome.
Isn't it true, for sake of argument, that if God exists and created everything, he also created Asperger's syndrome, which would make some of his creations more inherently bound for hell due to their difficulties in processing teleological ways of thinking?
Exactly. The theist has to explain, I think, what purpose their God would have for creating a neurological disorder like Asperger's syndrome. Why create a neurological variant that would make some of your creations less likely to accept teleological explanations for reality? Less able to get the lessons you are supposedly trying to imbue them with through life experience? Why create beings for whom their default worldview is to view that things just happen on account of natural laws, and not for any deeper metaphysical reason? Beings for whom such an explanation is so absurd they have no real choice but to reject it out of hand because of their neurological makeup? God is one cruel, capricious bastard if he actually designed Asperger's syndrome intentionally. It makes a lot more sense that Asperger's syndrome is a blind product of natural selection, a common mutation or variant on the basic human makeup, not unlike homosexuality. The mental gymnastics required of neurotypical believers is bad enough. I can't imagine the hell of being raised theistically with Asperger's, and am all the more grateful for my mostly secular upbringing, now that I'm aware of being an Aspie.
Would you prefer to date someone who is also diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome over someone neurotypical?
Not necessarily. One thing that the book 22 Things a Woman Must Know If She Loves a Man with Asperger's made clear is that Aspie women endure some of the same challenges of having a male partner with Asperger's as neurotypical women do. Asperger's syndrome is an autism spectrum disorder. Since it is a spectrum, this means some people are more profoundly affected and have more social deficits than others. I don't necessarily like other Aspies, though I do understand them better than neurotypicals do. Some Aspies and full-blown autistic people I do like, while others creep me out just as much as they creep out neurotypicals. A good friend of mine resisted my Asperger's diagnosis for a long time, because I think he felt that, if I could have the disorder, he might have it as well. In fact, I think he probably does have it, but I also think he's too frightened of that possibility to investigate it further for himself. Which is a shame, but I do understand. I do think that anyone I dated, neurotypical or Aspie, would need to be aware of what Asperger's syndrome is, and what my challenges and quirks are as an Aspie myself. I have definitely found myself attracted to some Aspie females since my diagnosis, but I'm still attracted to some neurotypical women as well. What is more important and what I do insist on is that I only am interested in dating a fellow atheist, or at most a weak deist or weak pantheist. I just can't see dating even a lapsed Christian. A lapsed Christian to me is like someone who has a severe mental illness kept in check by medication. If they go off their meds, watch out. The equivalent of going off meds for a lapsed Christian is starting to take their faith seriously and engage in more rituals and devotionals and collective self-delusion more than in the recent past, and trying to impose them on you, their partner. The only good alternative is that an actual close reading of the Bible, all of it, examined critically, with their brains engaged, might just make an atheist out of them in the end. But this is a risky gamble, and one that I played the odds on, and lost horribly in my first failed marriage. I don't recommend it. The only real way to win is not to play, and instead pick an honest, upfront atheist as your partner from the beginning.
Why do you do animations instead of appearing in your videos in person?
I hate the sound of my own voice, and I'm far too self-conscious to let myself appear on camera on YouTube. I've done a few brief videos on MySpace where I digitally alter my voice and obscure my face via special effects, but I just don't feel comfortable sharing my actual face and voice on YouTube, at least not now. And so I'll keep sticking to my animations for the time being.
Well, fair enough. Thanks for sharing your time and thoughts with us today.
It was my pleasure.